All right. Thank you, and welcome everyone who came tonight to hear this presentation, those who might be joining us online. So tonight we came here to talk a little bit about proposals that the Board of County Commissioners will be considering around new tobacco policies that will involve retail licensing, a purchase age of 21, a full flavor ban, and a local tobacco tax. And we set up this informational meeting tonight so that we could give you some background. Why are these policies being talked about? When will they be talked about? And what is the decision-making process? We're really going to spend most of our time this evening talking about the whys. You know, how did we get here? Why is this being talked about now? What is the problem that we're trying to address through these policy proposals? And then also going a little bit to what is that decision-making process, and when can you expect to be able to participate in it? So tonight we'll be going through some background information. We'll be taking some questions. This is not the forum where the policy issues get decided. That forum is with the Board of County Commissioners. And so hopefully this will provide background information so you can be informed and participate in those discussions going forward. So I am going to turn it over to do our background conversations. I would like to introduce Karen Kenneman. She is our Public Health Director for Pitkin County, and she will kick us off and introduce our next speaker.
Sure.
Thanks, Karen.
Yeah, so good evening and thanks for joining us. So we have a pretty formal presentation for you. We weren't sure how many people were going to come, and we also recognize it's being televised, and we want to allow everybody to have a chance to hear all of the information, as John said, and to get some education so that you feel like you know and what's being proposed, as well as an opportunity for you to ask questions for us, at least from a public health standpoint. We can answer those questions. So I can speak to, we call it a tobacco tax or a unit price increase, and then Risa, who's really our expert on tobacco within our department, will speak to the other components, so tobacco 21, the retail licensing, as well as the full flavor ban. Because of the nature of the funding that comes to us from the state around this work, it comes from Amendment 35 funds, which is tobacco tax funds at the state level. Arisa cannot talk to the unit price increase. So if you have specific questions about tobacco tax, direct them to me and I'll be able to answer those, but she's really great at answering all of the other questions. So I'm actually gonna kick it off to Risa to start the presentation, and then I'll pick up a little bit later. And I'm just curious, if people don't mind, if you could introduce yourself and just let us know your interest in the topic.
Sure.
Okay, thanks, Andrew.
Andrew, representing my family, the Wicks family. We have a retail establishment in Snowmass that does sell alcohol and tobacco, among many other things.
Great, thank you.
Jeff Reese. My parents own Airport Liquor. We sell tobacco there.
Great, thank you, Jeff.
My name is Jill Blumenberg, and I'm a case manager with the Buddy Program, so we serve youth and families from Aspen to Carbondale.
Great, thank you. Okay. And we have another public health member that helped us set up the room. So.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Like Karen said, this is going to be a little bit of a formal presentation, but really want to make time for you all to have a chance to ask your questions and better understand the issue. My name is Risa Turetsky. I'm the Health Promotion Program Administrator. It's a long title. Really, I run our tobacco program for Pitkin, Eagle, and Garfield counties. It's a regional program funded by the state. And in my other world, I guess, I'm also a nurse practitioner, and I've worked mostly with at-risk teenagers for my career. So really, want to take some time to understand the importance of tobacco policy measures, like why are we even talking about this today, and understand what Pitkin County is looking at, and like I said, make sure that we have time to answer your questions. So I'm going to speak a little bit about our community, but I'm going to speak mostly about what's happening with young people right now. I'm sure you've all seen in the newspaper and heard the explosion of what's being called a vaping epidemic with kids using e-cigarettes. It's not a secret anymore. We're all hearing about it. So our region is Health Statistics Region 12. So you can see we're in that dark zone, and the darker colors on this map represent higher rates of kids using e-cigarettes among the state. So Colorado is #1 in the country among the 39 states that did this Healthy Kids survey for kids vaping. So it's maybe not a gold medal that we want, but it's one that we got. And our rates in Colorado are close to 2 times the national average. In this valley here, our rates are about 3 times the national average for kids vaping. The blue bars here are Aspen to Parachute, so this represents 4 school districts. It actually represents 3 in this case. This is data from 2017, and Parachute School District wasn't able to complete the survey. So it's the Aspen School District, this Roaring Fork School District, Basalt to Glenwood Springs, and then Newcastle, Silt, and Rifle. And the yellow bar is the state average. So we're quite a bit above the state average in terms of kids who say that they've ever used an e-cigarette and kids who say that they've used an e-cigarette in the past 30 days. We don't have new data yet, but we know that nationally the rates for high school students have increased about 80%. So we're waiting to see what that's going to look like here when we do the 2019 survey. And we can see that between 2015, which is the first row, and 2017, there's been a large increase. And when we look at the Aspen School District, it's actually doubled from 21 to 42. This is, again, that whole valley. So between 2015 and 2017, we've seen a doubling. When we look at adults for chew tobacco, so when we look at adults for cigarettes, our rates in this valley are a little bit lower than the state average. But when we look at chew tobacco, we are at or above the state average. So the state average is 7% for adults using chew tobacco. In Pitkin County, we're at 7%, and at Garfield County, we're double that. But what's also interesting, I think, is that Garfield County has one of the highest rates of people trying to quit tobacco of any county in our region. When we ask kids, in that same Healthy Kids survey, when we ask them, how do you get your cigarettes? It's a little bit surprising to see that kids under 18 who report using tobacco products, or this one's actually for cigarettes, kids under 18 who report using cigarettes, 63% say that they buy them somewhere in this valley. Now, that again is Aspen to Parachute, so we don't know where that is, but they say they buy them at a brick and mortar store here. But what's the big deal, really? When we think about kids and their brain development, we're now learning that kids' brains develop up to the age of 25. And that means that their ability to learn, their ability to remember stuff, the way that they develop their impulse control is still developing until 25. And nicotine really has some pretty serious effects on how the brain develops, how those circuits are created. When we think of people who we know who smoke, when they come down from their cigarette and they need another hit of nicotine, we can see that they get jittery and they get uncomfortable. And we're seeing the same thing in kids who are using some of these vaping products throughout the day, that they're really having these short-term difficulties in paying attention in class. But what we're also seeing is that the use of nicotine really young is going to create those same difficulties in learning and creating memories and being able to focus and being able to pay attention in the long term. So that's not going to go away. In that 2017 survey, when we looked at the middle school, 1 out of every 5 8th graders had used an e-cigarette. We're actually seeing some 3rd graders come in with e-cigarettes now, which I don't think is because they know what they're doing. I think it's because their older sister or brother is using it, and they think that it's the way to be cool. I was talking to some kids recently, and they told me it's not even about using the Juul, it's about having the Juul, because then everybody wants to be your friend. And if we can remember back to our middle school years, when we just wanted everyone to be our friend and we didn't feel cool, and for some of the kids who are really struggling with making friends, I think that's becoming part of it. Another thing about kids' brains is that they're uniquely vulnerable to addiction, and the way that nicotine works, we're learning that it's one of the most addictive substances in the world. I don't really know how you measure that, but people who measure that have found that some of the addictive potential is close to that of heroin. And kids' brains are uniquely vulnerable to that, and it actually teaches them to depend on a substance rather than depend on their own ability to rebound. We're going to talk about why we're moving to tobacco 21 in a little while, and why a lot of states in the country are moving that way. And a big part of the reason is this, is that when we look at adult smokers, 90% of them, or 9 out of 10, actually started smoking before they were 18. And when we look at those who started before 21, it's 95%. And so it's that vulnerability to addiction, that ability to pick up kids at a young age and create lifelong customers. You all know about the Juul, so I don't need to tell you about that. There's been a lot of discussion about, well, how bad are these e-cigarettes? Are they a good way for adults to quit? And that is a debate that I'm not going to answer tonight. I think the research is still out on that. There are some countries who are looking at e-cigarettes as a way for harm reduction. We're also seeing some research that says that people who use e-cigarettes are a lot more likely to get heart disease, stroke, and depression than people who don't. But again, it is less than cigarettes. Cigarettes for sure are our hardest tobacco product out there for people's health. But e-cigarettes are not benign. They definitely have some chemicals in them that we're concerned about. A lot of the chemicals that we're constantly talking about trying to get out of the air that we breathe. So they have some flavoring components that are really dangerous for our lungs, that are approved for eating, but actually are not safe when we breathe them in, heavy metals, cancer-causing chemicals, and a good deal of nicotine. So just some quick facts. Lung cancer is still the #1 cause of death in Colorado and the #1 or #2 cause of death in the country. That's not to mention the number of other cancers like bladder cancer, cervical cancer, penile cancer that also come from smoking cigarettes. Nicotine is, like I said, one of the most addictive substances that we know. E-cigarettes are concerning even for adults. And we see that there is a particular focus of the marketing that happens by the tobacco industry to low-income folks, minority folks, and to kids. Okay. So I'll talk a little bit about the policies that are out there. Like we said, Karen's going to talk about the price policy, but after I'm done, if you have questions, I'm happy to take them before I turn over to Karen. So a lot of the reason that we're talking about the policy is to create a safe zone for kids in this region. Aspen has put in place, Aspen was the first in Colorado to put in place Tobacco 21, a tobacco retail license, a unit price increase to $3 per pack, and they've just instituted a ban on the sale of all flavored tobacco products, which I'll talk about in a minute. Basalt also went with Tobacco 21 in the retail license and the tax. Sorry, their tax is $2. Snowmass has gone with some of these policies and will consider the tax, I think, going forward. Avon, Carbondale. So you can see we've got these pockets right now, and it looks like Eagle County is looking at putting in place all of these policies in the next couple of months, and Garfield County is starting to talk about it as well. Part of what we hear from the retailers when we go out is, well, it's not fair if we have to abide by this policy and people literally walk across the street, and so their business moves. And so some of what we're trying to do is to even that playing field, but also to create that buffer for kids and other people that it's not just a matter of going across the street. So these are the other places that are now looking at very similar policies moving forward. When we look at what works for getting kids to stop, there's a list a little bit longer than this, but these are some of the policies that have been proven to help. And we are, of course, through public health and through the work that we're doing with the schools, we're working on prevention programs. We're working on how we help kids to get off these products. We're working on a ton of other things with the families and doing a ton of parent education to try to make sure that we are closing the circle. But part of that is policy, to really wrap around the kids wrap around the families and also the adults who, like we said in Garfield County, it's a really high number of people who are trying to quit tobacco. And we want to make sure that we have the support for them as well. So Tobacco 21, the idea is that it raises the age to buy tobacco to 21. It would apply to all tobacco products. And the real reason is that it makes it much harder for kids to get products, not just for them to walk into the store, but if I'm a 16 or 17-year-old, there's a good chance that there's an 18-year-old that I know or someone in my school who might be selling these products who's 18 and can get it. It's a lot less likely that I know someone who's 21 or 22 who's going to bring those products into the high school. In terms of the tobacco retail license, so Colorado is one of only 10 states that doesn't require a license for selling tobacco products. A license would require that anyone who wants to sell tobacco would just have to have a license for it like we do for liquor and other products. And it would specify some things that we think are really important. Currently, the training program for retailers is created by the tobacco industry and has not been proven to be effective in helping clerks at the front be able to make that decision about carding people and selling. So we'd like to just offer that for retailers, that they designated a more appropriate and more effective means of training. And then we could have some specifications in there, like we need signage that says that you have to be over 21 to buy here, and a certain distance from the schools to make it so that what we're hearing is that a lot of kids, it's an open campus at lunch, and so they walk off campus and they can go get products during the day. I think the other thing that's important about the license is that it does provide some assurance that everyone's being held to the same standards. So in Carbondale, after they put in place Tobacco 21, the law enforcement team went out and they did a compliance check to see how it was going, just like the FDA does with the liquor and things like that. And only 6 out of 10 stores passed that compliance check. So the idea is to just hold everybody to the same standards and make sure that everyone's accountable. In terms of the flavor, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, like I said, but the idea of the flavor restriction would be that only the tobacco flavored products would be sold. Like the Jewel comes in Virginia Slim, or it comes in tobacco, and that's tobacco flavor, but creme brulee and cucumber wouldn't be allowed. It would apply to all tobacco products, including menthol and mint, and the idea is that flavors are designed to appeal to kids and designed to give the impression that this is a safer product, more like candy or gum. I feel like I'm talking a lot, but I'm almost done. So in terms of flavors, in a national survey that was done asking kids who use tobacco, what they use and why they use it, 2/3 of the young tobacco users said they use tobacco because it comes in flavors that I like. And so that's everything from what we're seeing in the vape shops, like the Lovely Bubbly and the gummy bears and the, I don't know what else, to some of the products that we see coming in different flavors. Like now I see the cigarillos come in white peach and mango flavor, and the Zyn comes in every flavor of mint that looks like gum and candy. But also the menthol. Menthol has traditionally been used as a way to help people get started because it really smooths the way that cigarettes feel when you use them. We know that 50% of kids who start using cigarettes are using menthol, and 50% of kids who start using e-cigarettes are starting with mint. It's just a really calming flavor that makes the whole thing feel a lot smoother. But we also know that people who are using menthol have a much harder time quitting, and there's some new research out that shows that there are actually chemicals in the menthol, as well as in the cinnamon flavors, that make it a whole lot harder to quit, but also more dangerous on your lungs and your heart. I'm going to stop there. I think, should I take questions now?
Yeah.
I think that would be great. So I guess I'll just stop and see if there's any questions on those policies before Karen talks about the price.
What would the proposed distance be as part of the retail license?
That's a good question. So for the most part, what towns in Colorado are looking at is either 500, it's not feet, so 500 yards or 1,000 yards. So what we haven't gotten into that specific yet. Snowmans Snowmass? Yep. So Snowmass put in place the increase in the age, and they put in place the license. And we have heard rumor that they might be looking at a price increase. And they did not have any distance from the school because there isn't a school that they felt like they needed to be at a specific distance from. They weren't worried about the daycares.
So this is maybe a really broad question and basic, but given that so many parts of it are already in place in most of the Pitkin County municipalities, what does instituting the policy countywide?
Good question, Jill. Thank you. I should actually repeat your question. I'm sorry I cut you off, but I'm going to repeat your question because I realized that people online couldn't hear you. So your first question was, what does Snowmass have? And the answer is that they put in place Tobacco 21 and retail license. And the next question is, why do this if so many places in Pitkin County have already gone ahead with these policies? And the answer to that is, and this is something I'm still learning about Colorado, is that there are retailers within the county that are not under those municipalities' rulings. So we have kids in Aspen coming to parent meetings and telling us, well, that's fun, but we just go one stop down and we can get our products. So we're trying to make sure that there's consistency for all of the retailers. It also makes it more, I don't know if fair is the right word, but fair for the retailers in town who are saying we're losing our business to ABC, to Glenwood, to wherever, to just move down. So it'll just make everybody under the same regulation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but the goal to achieve this in Pitkin County is also obviously really tied in with the goal of achieving it in Eagle and Garfield, to have that uniformity across the whole region.
Right. So the idea, exactly what you said, I'm just going to reiterate it for the folks who might be online, is to have uniformity, is to work together as the three counties to where we know that there's so much mobility between these areas for adults and for kids, is to really make everything feel the same and have the same regulations, and like I said, create that safe zone for kids. We're going to work on Mesa next. We're getting there.
Yeah, if anyone would like to just ask a question.
Do you mind coming up? We can bring the chair over. You can bring your chair over. Yeah,
Just to the mic.
so that everyone else can hear you. We have this chair too. I just moved it so you wouldn't have to look over it.
Probably nice and long, too.
It is.
So again, yeah, I do represent a retail store, and so if you don't mind, I'd just like to respond to the three policy proposals that you have. We personally agree with Tobacco 21. We instated that policy voluntarily prior to it being enacted in Snowmass, and I think you guys are aware of that. And I also agree with having the retail licenses for the reasons that you explained, consistency and accountability. I guess just on the flavor restriction, and I'm sure you've heard it many times, I just take issues with not being able to offer flavors and giving adults the freedom to choose that flavor. I'm not a tobacco user myself, so I'm not necessarily trying to hold on to a type of product that I personally engage with. But for example, our newest, hottest selling product in the liquor sector of our store has been spiked seltzers over the summer. And they're very appealing. I imagine they would be appealing to youth. But the amount of adults, and it strikes me, not a product I use, but people that are 20, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s that like to engage in this flavored seltzer water, it just worries me what kind of state exists when we're banning flavored products that are supposed to be up to an adult's discretion. So I just take issue with that, I guess, on an American value system, as much as from the retailer, and I'd like you to respond to that. And
Sure. Yeah, thank you for that.
And I'm just trying to get on board too,
Yes.
so that's
And I really appreciate you being here today to ask that question, because I know that there are a lot of other retailers that have the question. I appreciate you being here in general, but also to ask that question. And I'm going to do my best to answer it, but if I don't answer it fully, let me know and I will try harder. So, and the other thing I wanted to say is thank you for going ahead and putting in place Tobacco 21 before the policy came down. We know that Roxy's, I believe it was Roxy's at ABC, also did the same thing. And that's amazing. That is really response to the community and response to the issue, and we're just really grateful for that kind of forward-stepping motion. In terms of the flavors with adults, I'm going to give an unsatisfactory answer first, which is that tobacco kills so many more people than alcohol does. And so when we try to align tobacco and alcohol, we're talking about really different things. Tobacco kills so many more people, it damages so many more families, and it damages so many more lives. And we do have an alcohol addiction problem in the country, but we have so many people who use alcohol who are not addicted to it. And I think when we think about personal rights and independence and freedom, being addicted to a product like nicotine isn't a freedom. It's when we think about the amount of money that people spend, it's in the thousands in terms of what they are spending per year because it's a product that they're really addicted to. So I think that is, for me, a lot of the reason why it's different and why the conversation's different. In terms of nicotine flavors, another thing that I think is different is that, for the most part, nicotine flavors are a starter product. We have some adults who use flavors, but it's more of an incidental thing than the majority of adults. The majority of young people are using flavors. As people get older, they tend to move into potentially menthol, but more other tobacco products that are not necessarily flavored. And I know that we do have people who stick with the flavors, just like we do have young people who start tobacco on a regular flavored product, like a regular Marlboro. And so what the concern really is that when we put that product on the shelf that is designed to look like something candy and something safe, and when parents are bringing home that product that looks like something candy and something safe, it gives the impression to kids that this might be a product for them, and therefore encourages that early start. The tobacco industry even calls flavored products a starter product. That's a word that we got from them. So the intention is not to remove this product from adults' choice, but to say we don't want that on the shelves where kids see it in our community, because we don't see tobacco as a product that is made for young people. And so if we're going to have flavors, we'd like people to try to buy them somewhere else. Does that make sense? I know I'm not, but that's the idea. Yeah, and I realize that it takes away some of the choice in terms of flavors, but we are not taking away tobacco, at least not yet. So people still have the opportunity to buy that product because we're not taking it off the shelves, but some of the flavors, yeah. That's what we're looking at. Thank you for your question. Should I turn it over to Karen?
Sure, if there's no more questions about those three components, jump in for the last one. Thank you. Yeah. Sure.
That would be great.
That'd be great.
So, I'm just a little bit curious to know, with the retail license, what sort of, what kind of mechanisms would that give? Who would be responsible around enforcement, and then what any infractions would mean and look like? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So that hasn't been fully decided yet because we're still looking at what makes the most sense for the county. I can tell you how it's being done in other places. So Basalt and Carbondale and Aspen, the law enforcement team is, well, and public health or environmental health is responsible for just going out and making sure that when we talk about retailer education and education for the clerks, that everyone has a mechanism in place for that and that everything's going okay. And if there's questions, they just check in on those things. In terms of doing those compliance checks, so the state generally does the checks. The FDA and the Department of Revenue come out and they do checks just like they do for liquor, right? And they do these underage compliance checks where they come out with somebody who tries to buy a product and they see how it goes. If we raise the age to 21, the state will only do up to 18. So we would be responsible as the county to fill in the rest of that. And we're still looking at how that would work. Carbondale and Basalt, the law enforcement teams have done it. It's where they've gone out and just done the checks like the FDA and the DOR have done. The last couple checks in Carbondale were very successful, and Basalt, everyone passed and there was no issue and no concerns. And so that is what enforcement and compliance checks would look like. In terms of the license, we're still looking at what the license fee would be, and it would just be a matter of then if a store did have an infraction, there's sort of two camps. One is that there's a fine, and the other one is a short-term suspension, and so it's still looking at what that would be. I'm interested to hear any thoughts on it. Jill, did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the last really component of this whole tobacco policy package, and that is tobacco tax, or we also refer to it as a unit price increase. Let's see if I can try this a little bit. So for the unit price increase, what the county commissioners are considering right now is looking at putting on the ballot in November a tobacco tax. And they're trying to align this with the city of Aspen so that there is that consistency, and that there, in essence, folks aren't necessarily price shopping, that there's consistency throughout the valley, but in particular, really the borders between Aspen and unincorporated Pitkin County. And so to align with the city of Aspen had passed a $3 tax with a 10-cent escalator every year until they hit $4. So they're in year 2. So we're looking at if we implemented this tax in 2020, that we'd be starting with a $3.20 tax. And then a 10-cent escalator on that as well, so that we would look at 10 cents to match inflation as time went on. Also a 40% increase on all other tobacco products, so past cigarettes. And again, to really go back to what Risa was saying, this is really, youth are price sensitive. We know that as taxes increase, use decreases. There's a lot of studies that have been done to show that relationship. And so we know this is one of the most successful ways to actually decrease youth use, and also to decrease general use, I would say, across all ages. And that Colorado has not kept up with the times as a state and really increasing their tobacco tax. It's one of the lowest in the country right now. And in addition to those pieces, we're really looking at the unit price increase as an opportunity to drive down use. It's not, there will be obviously a revenue that's generated, but that revenue would go back specifically into prevention programs and to really support youth and not engaging in tobacco products to begin with, and also cessation and education. So really looking at that prevention side of ensuring that youth aren't getting connected to, as Risa said, a very, very highly addictive substance, as addictive as heroin. So this is the first initiative that's coming to the county commissioners, and wanted to make you aware that we're doing a work session on August 13th, and then the first read will be August 14th. And then it will go to second read on August 28th, and that's the opportunity for public comment. So this is your chance to have a dialogue with the commissioners and to express yourselves, to give your feedback on the unit price increase of the tobacco tax. And then we'll be bringing back all the other components that Risa talked about, so tobacco 21, retail licensing, and the flavor ban or flavor restriction at a later date. So on your handout, you can see that there's the first read and second read for specific to tobacco tax. We don't have the times yet, but my contact information is at the bottom of the sheet, and I'm happy to share that with you when we have those. So I'm going to pause there, and I sort of didn't go through the presentation, but I think I shared all this information with you as far as where Colorado is and the relationship between use and tobacco tax. So I'll stop there and see if you have any questions.
So, if I'm reading this handout correctly, I just want to make sure, is the unit price increase something that is taken to voters by the county? And the other three issues, are those also brought to voters or just made by the county commissioners?
Yeah, so the tax is a ballot initiative, and the other three components are an ordinance. So they would be brought to the county commissioners in an ordinance form, and the county commissioners would choose to approve those or not.
Question, my friend? Thank you, Karen.
Yes.
And I apologize if I would seem like the devil's advocate in
That's all.
such an intimate room,
No.
but I guess that's, like I said, why I'm here. So I think I would fully support a unit price increase if it was something that was statewide. It as a retailer, it seems really hard to swallow on such a local level for the same reason that the retailers in Aspen are having trouble with it. Just because, people are so mobile and they're going all over. And not only that, we are already tend to be higher priced for all goods. So that increased perception of expensiveness can also be detrimental for other business. I just think it has, I don't want to say leakage, but there's some sort of correlation to that perception. So I guess, do you guys really feel like, is the local tax in Aspen working? Or, because we're seeing higher tobacco sales in some Aspen, I'll be honest.
Sure.
And so I feel just the way that people travel, and not even to mention the internet, it just, that coupled with the flavor restriction almost seems like, I know you're not touching on that, just seems like a recipe for black market. Again, the policy seems totally palpable and beneficial at the state level. Just have a lot of concerns at such localized institutions.
I think that the state question, and this is a little bit unique to Colorado, but I'm not entirely sure. We have a lot of local control, and I think there's been a lot of initiatives that have gone on at in other states to do more tobacco tax increases, and even there's states that have gone full T21, and it has blanketed the whole state. And so what has been happening in Colorado, it wasn't happening at the state level, and so it started to happen at the municipal level, really. And then the authority for counties to actually be able to do some of these initiatives just came through legislation this past year. And so Aspen, was really a leader actually in the state around some of these pieces, and then we were hearing a lot from the Aspen retailers to say, wow, it feels really punitive in Aspen because people can just go, to unincorporated Pitkin County, and sort of what you're alluding to. And so there is that sense of trying to have some parity or consistency with all of these pieces, including the tax, that we've really tried to think about how do we align better with all of the municipalities and Eagle County in particular sharing a border with us, that we have some consistency, and that the retailers aren't in essence penalized for doing the right thing or for being in a community that is passing more restrictions. I don't know if that's completely getting at what you're asking. As far as the efficacy in Aspen, they've just started to collect that data. What the research shows is that a community should wait about 12 months and let all of the processes and policies go into effect, and then start to collect the data and see how it's impacting the community. So I will say that I believe they've just started to collect that data, and we don't really have the results yet. So I can't speak to the efficacy of it, but when we look at when this has been done in other communities across the country, it has been effective. So we have that more national data, and I know that Aspen's looking at it very closely, and so will we, to see, we want to make sure that it's really doing the whys, right? That's the important part here, is that these pieces are really addressing those whys. Yeah. And respect, a retailer's position on this as well. That is a loss of a loss of revenue, and in hopes that, also thinking that this is a product that is truly, there's not a lot of good things you can say about a tobacco product for someone's health, right? I can't say actually any good thing about it. And so when we think about that, it's sort of this piece of respecting that it's a loss of revenue, and also understanding that it's a pretty horrible thing for people to have access to. And so there's that balance there. Does that answer it a little bit? Okay. Any other questions about either the unit price increase, or further questions for Risa on the other components? Okay. So, Risa, yeah, please.
Just about all the policies in general. I think one of the reasons that we have a slightly higher onus on us right now is that we have one of the highest rates in the state and one of the highest rates in the country. So we are in a situation right now where we are scrambling, and parents are asking at the schools, like banging down the doors, why are my third graders, my fourth graders, my fifth graders being offered vapes in the bathroom? So we have a situation that we're trying to deal with. And I don't know, Jill, if you want to say anything about what you're seeing in the program, but we have a slightly higher need at the moment to address.
I do want to just ask a question, and which is to see if you have any thoughts on why the rates in Colorado are so much higher nationally. Is there any research or theories on that?
I haven't seen good research. We obviously talk about it, and there are some theories. And the two theories are, one, that Colorado has some of the most lax policies. So like I said, we're one of the 10 states that doesn't license tobacco products. We're in the bottom 10 for state taxes. So like you said, it would make a lot more sense for these to be state policies, because our policies right now are not addressing the issues. There are also several states that have statewide flavor restrictions, not comprehensive flavor restrictions like what Aspen passed, but other sorts of flavor restrictions at the state level. And so coming into this, not having those kinds of restrictions, I don't think we had the protection for kids as a community, as a state. The other theory, which I think is most people's assumption, is our legalization of marijuana and sort of the normalizing of marijuana products, smoking, vaping marijuana, and how does that apply? I also understand that some of the e-cigarette vape products were piloted in Colorado, so there's just like an earlier look at that, and kids kind of got their hands on it sooner, but I don't think that would really impact the rates that we're seeing now. When I moved here a year ago, I went out to all the school districts and started talking to people, and I said, why are our rates so high here compared to Colorado? And a lot of what I heard is around the social norming. So if your parent has, you've all seen the Juul, the Pax Labs started making the Juul, and they make a marijuana vape product that looks exactly the same with different edges. If your parent has a Pax Labs marijuana vape laying on the counter and you're seeing a Juul at school, there's that sort of normalization and sort of feeling that it's safe and it's acceptable. And I think that could be part of what we're seeing here, just this more acceptance around it. I do see that sometimes when I give parent talks, some parents just being like, whatever, my 15-year-old's using it, my 14-year-old's using it. But I don't see a lot of that, and I don't think that those are the parents who come to my talks. And so we are still trying to figure that out. We still see a large I presented in Carbondale recently, and I presented some numbers that showed that 30% of kids say that they were sad most days out of the last week. And I think that we are definitely hearing from some kids that they're using this to cope. And so that may be part of the reason that we're seeing some higher numbers here. I'm not entirely sure. So I think we're playing a little bit of catch up with the policies right now, just trying to create that safer environment for kids. And the other thing with the policy that I usually talk about is that I think it creates a statement when your town that you live in or your community says, we don't think that this is actually okay for you guys as young people. We don't think that gummy bear flavored vape products or cherry flavored tobacco products, we don't want that to speak to you. And so I think that does make a statement, and if it doesn't make a statement to the kids, although all the kids in Aspen know, oh yeah, there's Tobacco 21, but if it doesn't make a statement to the kids, it does make a statement to the parents that in the community that we're concerned. And I think all the hype that's come up around this recently has shown that concern.
Yeah, and I'm not exactly answering your question, but there's so much, we talk about the marketing that the big tobacco really does. And it is, as I moved into public health and started to really understand the level of innovation that tobacco companies are doing, that Juul, the biggest vape company right now, has been bought up. 30% of it is owned by Altria, who is big cigarette, and just sort of the strategies that big tobacco will continue to employ to get more and more people hooked to nicotine. And when I think about, the in essence the enemy, it truly is big tobacco, and we are fighting a Goliath. As small communities and as parents and people who care about other people's health, this is a huge Goliath, and that's the innovation and the strategy that just keeps coming down the pipe. There's other products that are coming out beyond vape products that are just starting to emerge, and so feels like we're always behind. We can never get ahead of it. Policy is one of those ways that we can actually protect the whole community. You can do a lot of education and cessation work. It's very individualistic. It doesn't really have the biggest impact in community, and policy is one of the things that has the biggest impact to really fight that giant that we just don't. There's no community that has enough dollars to fight big tobacco. And so policy is one way that you can do this work without having a lot of dollars, really, to really combat that influence on our communities that we really care about.
I'll just add, we talked about young people a lot tonight. We really focused on young people, and that is really selfishly my focus is on young people. That's who I work with as a clinician, and I think that they are the next generation and we need to protect them. But I'm also concerned about older people, and as a nurse practitioner, I see a lot of people who I need to tell them, I'm sorry you have lung cancer, or I'm sorry your mother has cervical cancer. And we had a woman come and speak at the Aspen City Council meeting who talked about how her mother started smoking menthol cigarettes when she was 15 and she just got diagnosed with cervical cancer. We had another woman get up who wasn't with us at all, who got up and said her sister just got diagnosed with terminal cancer from smoking cigarettes since she was young. And so we're talking about our adults now, we're talking about our adults of the future, we're talking about our next generation of kids who will be adults, and how do we, like Karen said, protect them from what is so easy to just pick up when you're young and get addicted to. I mean, if you've ever smoked a cigarette, it's a good feeling, and there's a reason why people are addicted to it. And so I think it's really just that protection that we want to put in place.
Going up.
Yeah, there's only a few of us. Questions. Get comfortable.
I was just going to add a couple things just anecdotally from my own experience, and one of them is it related to the fact that my husband is a teacher at Basalt High School, and what I hear, and my daughter is senior at Basalt High School, and she and he both talk about just how rampant it is. And the reality is, she will talk about kids who literally are so addicted, both a psychological addiction and a physical addiction, that they cannot get through a 50-minute class. They are so agitated and need to be getting themselves outside or to the bathroom because they're needing to get, another hit off their vape, or I don't even know what they refer to.
It's a rip.
A rip, thank you. So I do agree with you that, I think anything our community can do as a community to spread that message. I do like to share my daughter is a softball player with the goal of being on a Division I softball team in college, and we were on a family vacation last year and found that she and her friend who was with her had a Juul, and we had been saying to her since she was little how addictive and dangerous tobacco was. And this is the quote-unquote good kid, good student, athlete, who has so much to lose if she's caught vaping, if she becomes addicted. Her entire future with her softball is at stake. But it just speaks to sort of that adolescent brain that you were talking about, that they're not necessarily they don't have the executive functioning skills to be making good decisions, and for whatever reason, it is so readily available. She said they wanted to try it, another friend had lent it to them, that, if they have a friend that has an older sibling, it's that easy for them to get. Just from experience with the buddy program, a lot of our mentors are coming to us and letting us know that this has come up with their little buddies experimenting with it. We know absolutely that even our mentees that are as young as in 5th grade, we know have been vaping, and you spoke to even younger than that. So I really appreciate the efforts you all are making, and I appreciate you as retailers being open to considering being on board with things that we can do around prevention. So thank you.
Jill, thank you for sharing. And because we're such a small room right now, I just want to make sure that it doesn't feel like any pressure on anybody. Like there's absolutely no fault finding. Like Karen said, we have one focus, which is the tobacco industry. And I think, thank you for sharing your story. And I guess I should share also that we are seeing the first increase in regular cigarette smoking in Aspen, Basalt, Carbondale, and Glenwood since e-cigarettes have taken off. So it's we talk a lot about the e-cigarettes because that's what we're seeing as a boom. But the increase in cigarettes is the first that we've seen in many, many, many years. There's been such a decline in kids smoking. And when we look at seniors up the valley as well, up and down the valley as well, 1 out of 5 are using chew tobacco every month, is what they tell us. So these are just like, we just don't expect that kids are using these products now, and we're surprised to be seeing that.
Anything?
I don't want to say anything. I'm done talking.
Any other questions? Any other things you'd like to?
Or anything
Explore.
that you'd like us to be thinking about
Thinking
as we
about,
move
right.
forward with
Mhm.
talking to the county commissioners? I don't know, just looking around.
There's only 5 people to look at. So.
Oh, okay, I'm one of 4. You're right.
As well.
That's just the
Speaking
human behavior. As a retailer, we're definitely on board, as I hope came across slightly. I just really worry. I would also like to see less people use tobacco, and especially less teenage use. As you asked the question, what should you guys consider as you move forward with the commissioners and with the local governments, would really just to understand, are we just going to create a black market? Will anything be solved? Are we just going to change buying behaviors and open up a new segment of drug dealing and continue with the same problems just because there is a need and a panic in the communities to really get something done. And I want to echo, what was your name? Jill. I want to echo Jill's sentiments that I do appreciate the work you guys are doing. You seem very passionate about making the changes, and I think a lot of people support you, even the people, some, adults, a lot of adults that are addicted to tobacco would support you in your endeavors. So as a community member, I definitely want to thank you. I just want to, as you progress, raise awareness that some things might be state level policies. I would just really like to ensure that, change happens and we don't just create, issues without any solutions.
Sure.
Awesome.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah. I can't speak to cigarettes and chew. E-cigarettes can still be ordered online by adults. They've actually put in some interesting age protection for, like, Jewel has put in some really interesting age protection that I had never seen before. So, yeah, right. And so then adults can still get those products online. Jewel also sells different percentages of nicotine, so I know that some people are ordering online already to get those products. But
Never underestimate the kids' clever.
oh my goodness.
Right.
What are
Yeah.
other mechanisms?
They yes, thank you, John. What are the mechanisms that Jewel put in place on their website? So they ask for your social security number, the last 4 of your social security number, and they run a background check to try to see if you're actually of age. I don't know how they're allowed to do that, but.
Well, all the kid needs is their parents' social
Mhm.
security number.
But there's a couple different things that they're trying to triangulate to get, it's a step in the right direction, I think. So that's something, and we'll see. And the black market question is always going to be an important question that we're asking, and we're already seeing e-cigarettes on the black market with kids, right, because it's being sold in the schools. And the question came up earlier, like, why the price if we're also doing the age? And I think that price gets transferred to your younger brother or sister when you go in and sell it at the school level. So because kids are not going to lose money selling nicotine products. Not Vancouver, Canada. I can't remember what it was, but there was something that they banned, and then they looked to see because they expected this black market thing to happen, and it didn't as much as they expected. Not nearly as much as they expected, especially after 12 months. But if you want to come with us and advocate at the state level, we're happy for support.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a powerful voice actually at the state level, and I do believe that the state may revisit the topic at some point.
I think the state is looking at tobacco 21 fairly soon, at least. So
Right.
what we do here can be a model, because they want to see that there's local support for a policy that they're considering, for better or for worse for everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think so.
John, would you like to say anything else before we?
I don't need
You go to the next
say anything
slide.
else other than, thank you guys.
That one is
Let
the
me get
dates.
to the mic before I get yelled at. Thank you for
You were
making the
so
time to be here and giving really thoughtful comments. You've given us some
Yes.
things to bring back to the board and consider on a fuller level as we move forward in these discussions. I encourage you to track the schedule for the Board of Commissioners and their consideration of these items. That'll be another opportunity to weigh in. Again, tonight was an opportunity to get the information out on the table, make sure folks know what's going on, so you can be informed and participate fully in the process. So thank you very much. And with that, it sounds like there's a concert next door that folks may want to get to. And thank you for presenting. We appreciate that, and we'll call it a night. Good morning. Thank you, residents.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.